Meet Maya Johnson, a bold, determined teen who faces discrimination every time she enters Hamilton Grocers. The store manager, Tom Blake, constantly belittles her because of her race, disability, and sexuality. But Maya isn't about to let his cruelty go unanswered. As she takes a stand, what begins as a personal battle soon sparks a powerful transformation in the entire community. Will Maya's courage be enough to change not just one man, but the world around her? Watch the story unfold, and don't forget to subscribe and leave a comment with your thoughts. Would you handle a challenge like this? The automatic doors of Hamilton Grocers slid open with a soft whoosh as Maya Johnson wheeled her way inside, her shopping list neatly folded on her lap. For most people in her small town, grocery shopping was a simple, mundane task. But for Maya, it was both a necessity and an emotional trial. At 16, Maya was a black, gay teenager, using a wheelchair due to cerebral palsy trifecta that, in her quiet town, often made her stand out in ways she didn't always want to. The cool, artificial air of the store hit her as she maneuvered her chair through the entrance. Maya had come here every week for as long as she could remember, ever since she was little, and her dad, David, had started bringing her along to teach her the value of independence. Now she shopped on her own, despite the challenges that came with it. Maya adjusted her grip on the wheels and mentally checked her list: pasta, tomatoes, spinach, mozzarella. It was a simple list, yet each item represented a small victory. She refused to let anyone else do her shopping. Not her dad, not her friends. She was fully capable, and she liked being in control of her own life, even in small ways. Still, as much as she tried to focus on the task at hand, Maya couldn't ignore the looming dread that always accompanied her weekly grocery runs. It wasn't the narrow aisles or the sometimes inconvenient product placements that bothered her. It was the manager. Tom Blake, the store manager, had been a fixture at Hamilton Grocers for nearly 2 decades. His presence was as much a part of the store as the aisles themselves. Middle-aged, with graying hair, a perpetually furrowed brow, and a gruff voice, Tom seemed to view his position as a small-town tyrant rather than a manager. For some customers, he was just a bit of a curmudgeon, brusque and no-nonsense. But for Maya, his behavior often crossed the line into something far uglier. Maya wheeled her way past the fresh produce, her eyes scanning the displays for the ripe tomatoes she needed for her favorite lasagna recipe. She liked to cook. It was one of the ways she could lose herself in something creative, something completely hers. But as she reached for a plastic bag to put her tomatoes in, she heard a familiar voice behind her. "You need help with that." Tom's voice was a mix of impatience and something more condescending, as though aiding Maya was a personal inconvenience to him. Maya turned slightly in her chair, glancing up at Tom's tall, imposing figure. She could already sense his irritation, even before she spoke. "No, I'm good. Thanks," she replied, keeping her tone polite but firm. She didn't want to give him any more ammunition than he already seemed to have. Tom huffed, clearly dissatisfied with her answer. "Just trying to help," he muttered, not bothering to hide the edge in his voice. He walked away, but not before giving her a lingering look that made Maya feel small. She gripped the wheels of her chair a little tighter, pushing the feeling of discomfort down as she continued her shopping. Encounters like this were nothing new. Tom always seemed to find a way to remind her that she was, in his eyes, an inconvenience. And while she had gotten used to brushing off people's ignorance, Tom's behavior had a way of digging under her skin. Maya sighed, focusing on the rest of her list. She wasn't going to let Tom ruin her day, not again. As Maya navigated through the aisles, she found herself thinking about all the little ways Tom had tried to make her feel out of place over the years. It wasn't always direct, the never-used slurs or overtly aggressive language, but there was an undercurrent to his tone, a coldness that sent a clear message. He didn't think she belonged. Maya knew Tom's type well. She had encountered people like him her entire life. He was the kind of person who resented anyone who didn't fit his narrow view of what a customer should be: people like her, who were disabled, people of color, or anyone who didn't align with his sense of what was normal. Hamilton Grocers was a small local store, but it was a fixture in the community. People came here not just to shop, but to chat with neighbors, exchange news, and catch up on town gossip. It was a hub of social activity, and for most, a pleasant experience. But for Maya, and anyone else who didn't fit into the mold, it was different. Tom treated customers like Maya as though they were extra work, something to be tolerated, but never embraced. His distaste wasn't always outright, but it was clear enough for her to notice. He would make offhand remarks about how difficult it must be to maneuver through the aisles, or how the store was designed to accommodate special needs. He would sigh loudly if she asked an employee for assistance, making it obvious that he didn't think she deserved the same respect as other customers. Other people in the store noticed too, but no one ever stepped in. Most of the time, they either looked the other way or pretended not to see what was happening. Some whispered among themselves, clearly uncomfortable, but still unwilling to confront Tom's behavior. It left Maya feeling isolated, like she was fighting this battle on her own. One Saturday, a few weeks prior, Maya had overheard Tom muttering to one of the cashiers, "She takes up so much space. Makes it harder for everyone else to move around." He hadn't said it directly to her, but she knew the comment was meant for her ears. That kind of pettiness was typical of Tom, and though it stung, Maya refused to let it show. She had learned early on how to keep her emotions in check when dealing with people like him. Her dad, David Johnson, had taught her that. He was a tall, strong man who radiated quiet confidence. As the COO of the grocery chain that owned Hamilton Grocers, David had seen his fair share of prejudice in the corporate world. But he had always maintained his dignity, choosing to handle adversity with grace rather than anger. He had raised Maya the same way, instilling in her the belief that her worth wasn't defined by how others saw her. But even David didn't know the full extent of what Maya dealt with at the store. Sure, she had mentioned Tom's behavior a few times, but she had always downplayed it. She didn't want her dad to think she couldn't handle herself. Still, it was getting harder to ignore the effect Tom was having on her. Each week, the weight of his prejudice chipped away at her confidence, and though she tried to brush it off, the constant microaggressions were starting to wear her down. Not everyone at Hamilton Grocers treated Maya poorly. Lisa Parker, one of the store's younger employees, had become a regular source of support for her. Lisa was in her mid-20s, tall with curly brown hair, and always had a friendly smile for Maya whenever she came into the store. Over the months, Lisa had grown more and more uncomfortable with Tom's behavior. She wasn't blind to how he treated Maya and other customers who didn't fit his narrow view of what was acceptable. But Lisa, like most of the employees, was in a tough spot. Tom was the manager, and speaking out against him could jeopardize her job. Still, Lisa found little ways to help Maya without drawing too much attention. She would assist her in reaching items from the higher shelves or help navigate crowded aisles when it was particularly busy. They'd even started chatting more over time, bonding over shared interests in movies and books. Maya appreciated Lisa's kindness, though she never wanted to feel like a charity case. On one particular Saturday, when the store was bustling with weekend shoppers, Tom made another of his thinly veiled comments. Maya had been waiting for Lisa to help her grab a box of pasta from the top shelf, and Tom, passing by, had muttered under his breath, "Always needing special treatment. Must be nice." Lisa's eyes flashed with irritation as she handed Maya the pasta. She waited until Tom was out of earshot before turning to Maya. "I don't know how you put up with him," Lisa said, her voice low but brimming with frustration. "He's such a jerk." Maya gave a small, tired smile. "I'm used to it. People like him have always been around." "That doesn't make it right," Lisa muttered. "He shouldn't be allowed to talk to you like that." Maya shrugged, though Lisa's words offered some comfort. "What can I do? Hes the manager. If I say anything, it'll just make things worse." Lisa frowned, clearly struggling with the injustice of it all. "Maybe, but it's not fair. You deserve to shop here like anyone else." Maya appreciated Lisa's support more than she let on. It was nice to have someone in her corner, even if it was just in small ways. But as much as Lisa's kindness helped, it didn't change the fact that Tom still had the power to make her feel unwelcome. Later that day, after Maya had finished her shopping and was heading toward the checkout, Lisa caught up with her. "You know, if you ever need me to say something, I will," Lisa offered quietly. "I don't mind sticking up for you." Maya smiled, touched by the offer. "Thanks, Lisa. I appreciate it, really. But I don't want you to get in trouble. I can handle Tom." Lisa looked like she wanted to argue, but she nodded. "All right. But if it gets to be too much, don't be afraid to speak up. You shouldn't have to deal with this alone." The following Saturday, the grocery store was packed. It was one of those busy afternoons when it felt like everyone in town had decided to do their shopping at once. Maya rolled into the store as usual, her shopping list in hand, determined not to let the crowds or Tom's sour presence get to her. She was halfway through her list when it happened. Maya was in the middle of an aisle, carefully picking out a can of tomatoes, when she felt Tom's presence behind her. She didn't need to turn around to know it was him. She could sense the shift in the air, the tension that always seemed to follow him. "You again?" Tom's voice cut through the chatter of the store, louder than usual. Maya could feel the eyes of nearby customers turning toward her, curious but unwilling to intervene. "I'm just shopping, Tom," Maya said calmly, refusing to meet his gaze. She focused on placing the can of tomatoes into her basket, trying to keep her hands steady despite the nervous energy bubbling up inside her. Tom scoffed, crossing his arms as he stepped closer. "Shopping, you're taking up half the aisle. You're always in the way. Do you really think this store is made for people like you?" Maya's heart skipped a beat, and for a moment she was too stunned to respond. "People like you." The words echoed in her head, sharper than any insult he'd thrown at her before. She could feel the heat rising to her cheeks, the embarrassment creeping in as other customers watched. She turned to face him, her voice steady despite the knot of anxiety tightening in her chest. "I have just as much right to be here as anyone else." Tom's eyes narrowed, his lips curling into a sneer. "Oh, you're a burden, Maya. Every time you come in here, you slow everyone down, make things harder for my employees. Maybe you should think about finding somewhere more suitable for your kind." The words hit her like a punch to the gut. A few customers nearby gasped, their shocked faces a mixture of horror and discomfort. But none of them stepped forward. None of them spoke up. They just watched, their eyes flicking back and forth between Maya and Tom as though they were witnessing a spectacle they didn't want to be a part of. For a moment, Maya felt like she couldn't breathe. The humiliation was overwhelming, washing over her in waves as her throat tightened. She wanted to scream, to tell Tom exactly how wrong he was, how his words were cruel and disgusting. But the weight of the moment kept her frozen in place. Tears pricked at the corners of her eyes, but she blinked them back, refusing to give Tom the satisfaction of seeing her break down. Without another word, she turned her chair and wheeled herself toward the exit, her hands shaking as she pushed herself forward. She could hear Tom muttering something behind her, but she didn't look back. As the automatic doors slid open, letting her out into the cool afternoon air, Maya felt the weight of the encounter settle heavily on her chest. She had always prided herself on being strong, on not letting people like Tom get to her. But today, he had crossed a line. Today, his words had cut deeper than she expected, and for the first time in a long time, Maya felt truly powerless. She wheeled herself toward her car, her heart pounding in her chest. She hated how vulnerable she felt, how exposed. It wasn't just the words, it was the way the crowd had watched her, the way they had stood by in silence as she was humiliated in front of them. Maya gripped the wheels of her chair tightly, trying to push away the sting of Tom's cruelty. She wouldn't let him break her. She couldn't. But as she sat in the parking lot taking deep, shaky breaths, Maya realized that this was something she could keep brushing off. Tom's words had crossed a line, and if she didn't stand up for herself now, he would keep treating her like this. He would keep treating others like this. And Maya knew she wasn't the only one. Later that evening, Maya sat in silence at the dinner table, pushing her food around her plate. Her father, David Johnson, watched her with concern. Maya was usually talkative, sharing stories about her day, discussing plans with her friends, or talking about what book she was reading. But tonight, she was unusually quiet. David wasn't the kind of parent to push, but he knew something had happened. His daughter had always been strong, resilient in the face of adversity, but she wasn't invincible. He had seen that look on her face before, the quiet, subdued demeanor she adopted when something had worn her down. Maya finally set her fork down, her appetite long gone. She looked up at her father, her expression a mixture of frustration and sadness. "Dad, something happened at the store today." David leaned forward, his expression softening. "What happened, sweetheart?" Maya took a deep breath, gathering her thoughts. She hated feeling vulnerable, especially in front of her dad. He had always been her biggest supporter, her rock, and she didn't want to burden him with her struggles. But she couldn't keep this to herself any longer. "It's Tom," she began, her voice shaky. "He humiliated me today, in front of everyone." David's jaw tightened, though he kept his voice steady. "What did he say?" Maya hesitated, the sting of Tom's words still fresh in her mind. "He called me a burden. He said I take up too much space and make things harder for everyone else. He even told me I should find somewhere more suitable to shop, as if I don't belong there." David's hand gripped his fork tightly, his knuckles turning white. He had heard about Tom before. Maya had mentioned his rudeness in passing, but this was different. This wasn't just an offhand comment or a bad attitude. This was deliberate, targeted cruelty. David took a deep breath, trying to calm the surge of anger building in his chest. He didn't want to make Maya feel like she was causing trouble, but as her father, and as the COO of the very company that owned Hamilton Grocer, she couldn't ignore this. "He wouldn't?" "I'm sorry you had to deal with that, Maya," David said, his voice calm but laced with intensity. "Tom has no right to treat you or anyone like that. You deserve to be treated with respect, and what he did was completely unacceptable." Maya nodded, her eyes downcast. "I know, but it feels like no matter what I do, people like him will always see me as less." David's heart ached at the pain in her voice. He had spent his entire career fighting against the same kind of prejudice, racism, ableism, and ignorance that had tried to keep him from succeeding. But he had always believed in facing adversity with grace and dignity, values he had tried to instill in Maya. "I've dealt with people like Tom before," David said gently, "and I know how hard it can be. But you're not less, Maya. You're more. You're stronger, smarter, and better than people like him will ever understand." Maya gave him a small, appreciative smile, but the hurt in her eyes hadn't fully faded. David hesitated for a moment before speaking again. "You know, I can take care of this if you want. I have the authority to do something about Tom." Maya looked up at him, surprised. "You'd fire him?" David shook his head. "I don't want to just fire him. I want to fix the bigger problem. What Tom did wasn't just about you, it's about how he treats people who don't fit into his narrow view of the world. Firing him would be the easy way out. I want to change the culture of that store." Maya thought about it for a moment, the idea tempting. But something inside her resisted. She didn't want her dad to fight her battles for her. She had always prided herself on handling her own challenges, and this was no different. "I don't want you to use your position for me, Dad," Maya said softly. "I want to handle this myself. I need to." David nodded, his heart swelling with pride. "I understand. And I trust you to handle it. But if you ever need me, just know I'm here." Maya gave him a grateful smile. "Thanks, Dad." David placed his hand on hers, his voice filled with quiet determination. "You're not alone in this, Maya. And when the time comes, we'll make sure no one else ever has to deal with someone like Tom again." The next morning, Maya woke with a sense of determination that had been missing the day before. Tom's words still echoed in her mind, but now, instead of making her feel small, they fueled her resolve. She wasn't going to let him get away with it. She couldn't. After breakfast, Maya sat down at her desk, opening her laptop and pulling out a notebook. If she was going to confront Tom, she needed to be prepared. She started by researching anti-discrimination laws, focusing on the rights of disabled individuals in public spaces. She had always known she had rights, but seeing it all laid out in black and white gave her a sense of empowerment she hadn't felt in the moment at the store. It didn't take long for Maya to realize that Tom's behavior wasn't just rude, it was illegal. Under the Americans with Disabilities Act, ADA, she was entitled to equal treatment and access in public places, including grocery stores. Tom's comments about her being a burden and taking up space violated her rights, and she had every reason to report him. But Maya didn't want to rush into things. She knew that simply filing a complaint wouldn't solve the deeper problem. Tom's behavior wasn't just about one bad day, it was a symptom of a much larger issue, the culture of exclusion and intolerance that he had fostered at Hamilton Grocers. As she continued her research, Maya came across articles and stories about others who had faced similar discrimination. She read about people who had fought for their rights in small towns like hers. People who had taken a stand against ableism, racism, and other forms of prejudice. Their stories inspired her, reminding her that change was possible, but it wouldn't come without a fight. By the time she had finished her research, Maya had a plan. She wasn't just going to report Tom to HR, she was going to make sure the entire community knew what was happening at Hamilton Grocers. She wanted to spark a conversation, to force people to confront the prejudice that had been allowed to fester in their town for far too long. Maya's first step was to reach out to Lisa. She knew Lisa had seen firsthand how Tom treated her, and she trusted her to back up her claims. Later that afternoon, Maya sent Lisa a text. "Maya, hey, can I ask you something? It's about Tom." A few minutes later, her phone buzzed with a reply. "Lisa, of course. What's up?" Maya hesitated for a moment before typing out her response. "Maya, I want to report him. He crossed a line yesterday, and I can't just let it go. But I need your help. Will you back me up?" There was a long pause before Lisa's next message appeared. "Lisa, absolutely. I've seen the way he treats you, and it's not okay. He'll support you in whatever you decide to do." Maya let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Having Lisa's support meant everything to her, and knowing she wasn't alone gave her the strength she needed to move forward. With Lisa on her side, Maya drafted a formal complaint. She detailed every instance of Tom's discriminatory behavior, from his dismissive comments to his outright insults. She included specific dates and times, along with the names of employees who had witnessed the incidents. Once the complaint was complete, she sent it to the corporate office of the grocery chain, addressing it to the HR department. As she hit send, Maya felt a mix of nervousness and relief. She had taken the first step, and now there was no turning back. The days that followed were a blur of anxiety and anticipation for Maya. She had done everything she could to prepare for the fallout of her complaint, but waiting for a response was agonizing. Every time her phone buzzed with a new notification, her heart would race, only to be disappointed when it wasn't the email she was waiting for. In the meantime, Maya continued to visit the grocery store. She refused to let Tom's behavior keep her away. Each time she went, she was accompanied by Lisa, who made sure to stick by her side as a quiet but firm show of solidarity. On one particularly busy Saturday, Maya decided to bring in some additional support. She had reached out to a local disability rights organization that she had come across during her research, explaining her situation and asking if they could provide any guidance or assistance. To her surprise, they had responded with enthusiasm, offering to send a few representatives to accompany her on her next shopping trip. That Saturday, Maya arrived at the store with a small group of advocates by her side. There were 4 of them, each wearing bright T-shirts that read, "Accessibility is a right, not a favor." They were friendly, but their presence was a statement. Maya wasn't just one person facing down discrimination anymore. She was part of a larger movement. As they entered the store, Tom's eyes immediately landed on them. He was standing near the entrance, chatting with one of the cashiers, but as soon as he saw the group, his expression darkened. He didn't approach them right away, but Maya could feel his gaze on her as she moved through the aisles. Lisa, who had arrived a little earlier, met up with them in the pasta aisle. "You've got quite the crew with you today," she said with a grin, glancing at the advocates. Maya smiled, though her nerves were still buzzing. "Yeah, I figured it was time to make a statement." Lisa nodded, her admiration clear. "Good for you." They continued shopping, Maya feeling more confident with each step. The presence of the advocates had changed the atmosphere in the store. Other customers noticed them, some nodding in quiet approval, while others whispered to one another, clearly unsure of what to make of the situation. It didn't matter. What mattered was that Maya wasn't alone. As they approached the checkout, Tom finally made his move. He stepped in front of Maya's group, blocking their path with a scowl on his face. "What's this about?" he demanded, his voice dripping with irritation. "You trying to make some kind of scene?" Maya looked up at him, her heart pounding, but she kept her voice steady. "No, Tom. I'm just here to do my shopping, like everyone else." Tom's scowl deepened. "Yeah, well, you're making it harder for everyone else with this parade you've got going on." One of the advocates, a woman named Sarah, stepped forward. "We're here to support Maya, Tom. She has every right to shop here without being harassed." Tom shot her a glare. "I don't know what you think you're doing, but this isn't some charity. I run a business, and I don't have time for—" "Enough, Tom," Maya interrupted, her voice rising slightly. She was done listening to his excuses, his thinly veiled insults. "I'm not a burden. I'm a customer, and I'm done being treated like I don't belong here." The silence that followed was thick with tension. Customers and employees had stopped what they were doing, watching the confrontation unfold with wide eyes. Tom looked like he wanted to argue, but for the first time, Maya saw something in his eyes: hesitation, maybe even fear. Before he could respond, Sarah spoke again. "Maya has filed a formal complaint with corporate, and they will be investigating your behavior. I suggest you take this seriously, Tom. Discrimination against disabled individuals is illegal under the ADA, and if you continue to harass her, there will be consequences." Tom's face went pale and he took a step back. The weight of the situation had finally sunk in. He wasn't just dealing with a disgruntled customer, he was facing legal action. Without another word, Tom turned on his heel and stormed off, his shoulders tense with anger and embarrassment. Maya let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. The adrenaline from the confrontation buzzed in her veins, but there was also a sense of relief. She had stood her ground. She had spoken up, and Tom had backed down. Lisa placed a hand on her shoulder, giving her a reassuring smile. "You were amazing." Maya smiled back, though her heart was still racing. "Thanks. I couldn't stay silent anymore." Sarah nodded in approval. "You did the right thing. And now, it's up to corporate to make sure Tom faces the consequences of his actions." As they checked out and left the store, Maya felt a sense of accomplishment that she hadn't felt in a long time. She had taken the first step toward standing up for herself and for others like her. And while the fight wasn't over, she knew she wasn't fighting it alone. While Maya was busy gathering support and confronting Tom, her father, David, was working behind the scenes. As the chief operating officer of the grocery chain, David had access to resources that Maya didn't, but he didn't want to undermine her efforts. He had made a promise to let her handle this on her own terms, and he intended to keep that promise. Still, he couldn't sit by and do nothing. David had already put in a call to the corporate office, speaking with the head of HR about Maya's complaint. He had made it clear that this was just about his daughter. This was about the culture of the store and the way it treated its customers. He wanted to see real systemic change, not just a slap on the wrist for Tom. Over the next few days, David quietly monitored the situation, making sure that the complaint was being taken seriously. He didn't mention his position to anyone in town, allowing the process to unfold naturally. But he kept close tabs on everything, ready to step in if necessary. He knew Maya was strong, and he trusted her to fight her own battles. But he also knew that sometimes the people in power needed a little push in the right direction. The next time Maya entered Hamilton Grocers, the tension was palpable. The store was buzzing with customers, but there was an undercurrent of unease that hadn't been there before. Word had spread about the complaint Maya had filed, and people were talking. Maya felt it in the way some customers glanced at her, their eyes lingering a little too long before quickly looking away. She could hear snippets of conversation, people whispering about the girl in the wheelchair, and that manager who's in trouble now. It made her stomach churn, but she didn't let it show. She was used to being the subject of people's stares, their curiosity or pity. But this was different. This time, it wasn't just about her disability, it was about the fight she had started, the stand she had taken against someone in a position of power. As Maya moved through the store with Lisa by her side, she noticed Tom standing near the checkout, his expression dark. He hadn't approached her yet, but she could feel his eyes on her, watching, waiting. Finally, as Maya and Lisa finished their shopping and headed toward the checkout, Tom made his move. "You again?" Tom's voice was loud, cutting through the low murmur of the store. People turned to look, their attention immediately drawn to the confrontation. "You think filing some complaint is going to change anything? You're just wasting everyone's time." Maya felt her heart race, but she didn't back down. She had prepared for this. "I'm not wasting anyone's time, Tom. I'm standing up for myself. For my rights," Tom sneered, crossing his arms over his chest. "Your rights. This is my store. I run things here. And you've done nothing but cause problems since you started coming here." Maya's hands tightened on the wheels of her chair, but her voice remained steady. "This isn't your store, Tom, and you don't get to decide who belongs here and who doesn't. I belong here just as much as anyone else." Tom took a step closer, his voice dripping with contempt. "You think you're special because you're in that chair? You're not. You're just making things harder for everyone else." The silence in the store was deafening. Customers and employees alike had stopped what they were doing, their eyes glued to the scene unfolding in front of them. Maya's pulse pounded in her ears, but she refused to let Tom's words break her. "I'm not the problem, Tom. You are. You're the one who makes this store a hostile place for people like me, and I won't let you get away with it." Before Tom could respond, a deep, calm voice cut through the tension. "That's enough." Maya turned to see her father standing at the entrance, his tall frame imposing as he strode toward them. His face was calm, but there was a fire in his eyes that made it clear he wasn't here. Just as her father, he was here as the COO of the company. Tom's face went pale as David approached, his posture stiffening with fear and anger. David stopped in front of Tom, his voice calm but filled with authority. "I've heard enough. It's time we talk, Tom." The store went eerily silent as David Johnson, Maya's father, and the chief operating officer of the grocery chain approached Tom Blake. The crowd, which had been watching the confrontation unfold, seemed to hold its collective breath. Maya had seen her father handle tough situations before. He had always been calm, composed, and commanding. But this was different. This wasn't just a corporate matter. This was personal. Tom, for all his bluster, looked rattled. His usual bravado had crumbled the moment David stepped forward, and now he was staring at the man who had the power to change his life in an instant. "Mr. Blake," David began, his tone measured but firm. "It's time we had a conversation about how you've been treating my daughter, and by extension, your customers." Tom's mouth opened, but no words came out. He had built his authority in the store by belittling others, assuming no one would challenge him, especially not someone as vulnerable as Maya. But now, the person challenging him was the very man who could determine his future. David didn't wait for Tom to gather his thoughts. "You see, Tom, I've been watching you for some time now. I've heard about your comments, your behavior, and your treatment of Maya and others like her. This is a grocery store, not your personal kingdom. And in this store, every customer, regardless of their race, gender, or ability, deserves to be treated with respect." Maya felt a surge of pride as her father spoke. He wasn't raising his voice, but his words carried weight. She had known her father was capable of handling this, but seeing him take control of the situation filled her with a sense of relief she hadn't realized she needed. Tom shifted uneasily, glancing around as if looking for a way out, but David pressed on. "Your behavior, Tom, is not only unprofessional, it's illegal. The Americans with Disabilities Act protects people like my daughter from discrimination. You've crossed that line, repeatedly, and it's time for you to face the consequences." The tension in the room was palpable. Employees who had once feared Tom's wrath now stood on the sidelines, watching as the power dynamic shifted. Some of them exchanged glances, clearly uncomfortable with the way things had been going in the store, but unsure of what to do until now. This confrontation had made it clear that change was not only possible, but inevitable. Tom swallowed hard, finally finding his voice. "Two didn't mean any harm. I was just trying to run the store efficiently." David raised an eyebrow, unimpressed by the excuse. "Efficiently? By demeaning your customers, by making people feel unwelcome. That's not efficiency, Tom. That's discrimination. And it has no place in this company." Tom's face flushed. He opened his mouth to argue, but David didn't give him the chance. "Let me be clear," David said, his voice calm but authoritative. "This is not a discussion about whether or not you're in the wrong. You are. The only question now is what you're going to do about it." Maya watched as Tom's expression shifted from defiance to something resembling fear. He looked like a man cornered, forced to confront the reality of his actions. But Maya also saw something else, a glimmer of recognition, maybe even guilt. For the first time, it seemed like Tom understood just how far he had crossed the line. David took a step closer, his tone softening slightly, though the intensity remained. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to undergo sensitivity and diversity training. You will learn how to treat every single customer and employee with the respect they deserve. Or you will no longer be employed by this company. Do I make myself clear?" Tom nodded, his voice barely above a whisper. "Yes, sir." David held his gaze for a long moment, making sure the message had sunk in. "Good. And let me make one more thing clear, Tom. This isn't just about you. This store will become a place where everyone feels welcome. We will not tolerate discrimination in any form. If you're going to be part of this company, you're going to be part of that change." Tom nodded again, his face pale. The weight of David's words had settled over him, and for the first time, Maya saw a shift in his posture. He no longer looked like the arrogant manager who had tormented her for so long. He looked humbled, almost defeated. David turned to the gathered employees and customers, his voice carrying through the store. "This is a new beginning for Hamilton Grocers. We're going to build a place where everyone is treated with dignity and respect. And it's going to start right now." The crowd murmured in agreement, the tension beginning to lift as David's words settled in. Maya could see the relief on some of the employees' face, people who had likely been afraid to speak up against Tom, but were now emboldened by David's leadership. David turned back to Maya, his expression softening. "Ready to finish your shopping, sweetheart?" Maya smiled, her heart swelling with pride. "Yeah, I think I am." Together, they walked well. Maya wheeled through the store, the atmosphere lighter, the weight of Tom's oppressive presence finally beginning to fade. The days following David's confrontation with Tom were filled with change both in the store and in the town. News of the incident spread quickly, and people began to talk. Some were shocked to learn that the store manager they had known for years had been acting so poorly behind the scenes. Others weren't surprised at all. But everyone seemed to agree on one thing: Hamilton Grocers would never be the same. The corporate office had responded to Maya's complaint, launching an official investigation into Tom's behavior and the overall culture of the store. In the meantime, Tom was placed on leave, pending the completion of his mandatory sensitivity and diversity training. For Maya, the experience was surreal. She had gone from feeling like she had no voice to becoming the catalyst for a major change. It wasn't just about her anymore, it was about the community, about creating a space where people could shop without fear of discrimination or humiliation. She had never intended to start a movement, but that's exactly what had happened. Lisa, the store assistant who had always supported Maya, was thrilled by the changes. She had witnessed firsthand how toxic the work environment had become under Tom's leadership. And now, she felt a sense of hope for the future. "It feels like a weight has been lifted," Lisa told Maya one afternoon as they shopped together. "People are starting to open up. You know, there's less tension, less fear. It's like we can finally breathe." Maya nodded, smiling as she picked out a box of pasta from the shelf. "I think things are going to get better." And they were. In the weeks that followed, Hamilton Grocers implemented new policies focused on inclusivity and customer service. Employees were given training on how to better assist disabled customers, and the store made small but meaningful changes to ensure that everyone could shop with ease. Aisles were widened, signage was improved, and checkout lanes were modified to be more accessible. Tom returned to work after completing his training, but he was a changed man. Gone was the arrogance and disdain that had defined his interactions with customers. Now he greeted every shopper with respect, offering assistance when needed and treating everyone equally. It wasn't easy for Tom. He was still learning, still grappling with his own biases, but he was trying. And that, Maya thought, was a start. One afternoon, Tom approached Maya as she was checking out, his expression tentative. "Maya," he began, his voice softer than she had ever heard it. "I just wanted to say I'm sorry for everything." Maya looked up at him, her heart beating a little faster. She had heard apologies before, but this one felt different. There was something sincere in Tom's eyes, something that told her he was genuinely remorseful. "I know I can't undo what I said," Tom continued, his voice tinged with regret. "But I'm trying to be better. I hope you'll give me a chance to prove that." Maya studied him for a moment, her emotions mixed. She had spent so long feeling angry and hurt, and while she wasn't sure she could fully forgive him yet, she could see that he was trying. And that effort, she realized, was more than she had ever expected from him. "I appreciate that, Tom," Maya said finally, her voice steady. "I hope you keep working on it." Tom nodded, looking relieved. "I will. I promise." As Tom walked away, Maya felt a sense of closure that she hadn't expected. It didn't erase the pain of what had happened, but it was a step forward both for her and for Tom. What started as one confrontation between Maya and Tom quickly turned into something much bigger. As word spread about the changes happening at Hamilton Grocers, other businesses in town began to take notice. Maya's story had sparked a larger conversation about inclusion, accessibility, and the treatment of marginalized individuals. Local organizations that advocated for disability rights and social justice began partnering with the store, holding events and workshops to educate the community about diversity and inclusion. Hamilton Grocers became a symbol of change, a place where people could come together to learn, grow, and support one another. Maya was invited to speak at one of these events, a community forum on accessibility and equality. Though public speaking wasn't something she had ever been particularly fond of, she knew it was important. Her voice had helped bring about change, and now she had the opportunity to inspire others to do the same. The day of the event, the store was packed with people, customers, employees, community leaders, and activists, all gathered to listen and learn. Maya sat at the front of the room, waiting for her turn to speak. Her heart raced with nerves, but she knew this moment mattered. When her name was called, Maya wheeled herself to the front of the room, her hands gripping the sides of her chair as she faced the crowd. She took a deep breath, her mind racing with everything she wanted to say. "Thank you all for being here," she began, her voice steady despite the nerves. "When I first started coming to Hamilton Grocers, I never imagined that I would be standing here speaking to all of you. For a long time, I felt like I didn't belong, like my disability made me less than everyone else. But that's not true. And it's not true for anyone." The room was silent, the audience hanging on her every word. "We all have a right to be treated with dignity and respect, no matter who we are, what we look like, or how we move through the world," Maya continued. "And while it's easy to think that one person can't make a difference, I'm standing here to tell you that we can. Change starts with us, with each of us choosing to stand up for what's right, even when it's hard." A ripple of applause spread through the room, and Maya felt a surge of pride. She had been afraid, but she had spoken her truth, and people were listening. As she finished her speech, the crowd erupted into cheers. Maya smiled, her heart full. This was what she had fought for. This moment, this community, this sense of belonging. And she knew, as she wheeled back to her seat, that this was only the beginning. Over the next few months, Hamilton Grocers continued to evolve. The store had become a model of inclusivity, not just in the way it was designed, but in the way it treated its customers and employees. People from all walks of life felt welcome, and the sense of community that had always existed in the town was now stronger than ever. Maya's story had touched the lives of so many people, those who had experienced discrimination, those who had stood by in silence, and those who had never realized the impact of their actions. It had sparked a movement, a call for change that reached far beyond the walls of the grocery store. Maya continued to visit the store regularly, her confidence growing with each trip. She was no longer afraid of running into Tom or being humiliated in front of other customers. Instead, she felt empowered by her own strength, and by the knowledge that she had helped create a better future for herself and others. One day, as Maya wheeled through the aisles, she noticed a small sign near the entrance. It was new, and it caught her eye immediately. The sign read, "Everyone is welcome here." Maya smiled, feeling a deep sense of pride and accomplishment. That sign wasn't just a statement, it was a testament to everything she had fought for. It was a promise that no one would ever feel unwelcome or unwanted in that store again. As she continued her shopping, Maya knew that her journey wasn't over. There were still challenges to face, still battles to fight. But she also knew that she wasn't alone. She had her father, her friends, her community, and most importantly, herself. And together, they had proven that change was not only possible, it was inevitable. Tom Blake had been the store manager at Hamilton Grocers for almost 20 years, and in all that time, he had never felt the level of discomfort he now carried with him daily. The moment David Johnson, the COO, had confronted him, something fundamental in Tom had shifted. He had been forced to reflect on his actions, not just toward Maya, but toward all the customers who didn't fit into his narrow view of what was normal. The sensitivity and diversity training he had been required to attend was no walk in the park. Tom had expected it to be a series of tedious lectures, but what he encountered was far more challenging. The training forced him to confront his own biases, to see how his behavior had hurt people in ways he hadn't fully understood, or perhaps hadn't wanted to understand. It wasn't just about being told what he had done wrong. The sessions were interactive and deeply personal, designed to get participants to see things from the perspective of those they had mistreated. Tom found himself listening to stories from people with disabilities, people of color, and others who had faced discrimination. He saw their pain and frustration, and for the first time, he realized that his actions weren't just harmless comments or slight inconveniences, they had caused real harm. One of the exercises in the training involved role-playing. Tom had to navigate everyday tasks while using a wheelchair, just as Maya did. It was eye-opening. He had always assumed that the store was perfectly functional for all customers. But when he was forced to experience the narrow aisles and hard-to-reach shelves from a different perspective, he understood how difficult it must have been for Maya all those years. The frustration he felt in those moments was nothing compared to what she must have experienced every week, compounded by his own dismissive behavior. Tom came out of the training feeling humbled. He still had a long way to go, but he was determined to do better. He had made a promise to Maya, to David, and to himself. Now it was time to start living up to it. Back at the store, Tom slowly began to rebuild relationships with his employees and customers. He knew he couldn't erase the past, but he could work to create a better future. He started by making small changes. He personally checked the accessibility of each aisle, ensuring that the layout was more accommodating for customers with disabilities. He also held staff meetings where he emphasized the importance of treating everyone with respect, regardless of their background or abilities. The real test, however, came in how he treated Maya. The first time Tom approached Maya after his training, it was clear that both of them were unsure how the interaction would go. Maya was understandably guarded, and Tom was nervous. But he knew this was part of his growth, owning up to his mistakes and showing through his actions that he had changed. "Hey, Maya," Tom said cautiously as he approached her one afternoon while she was picking up some groceries. "I just wanted to check in and see if there's anything I can help with today." Maya looked up, her expression wary. She had heard apologies before, and while she appreciated Tom's efforts, she wasn't going to simply forgive and forget. Trust had to be rebuilt, and that would take time. "I'm good, thanks," Maya replied, keeping her voice neutral. She wasn't rude, but she wasn't going to let him off the hook easily either. Tom nodded, accepting her response. He wasn't expecting her to forgive him immediately, if at all. "If you ever need anything, just let me know," he said, before walking away, giving her the space she needed. In the following weeks, Tom continued to approach Maya with respect and a genuine desire to make amends. Slowly but surely, she began to see that he was serious about changing. He wasn't just putting on a show for the sake of appearance. She was working hard to be better, not just for her, but for everyone who walked through the doors of the store. Maya didn't fully trust him yet, but she appreciated the effort. Change wasn't easy, and she knew that better than anyone. Still, seeing Tom's growth gave her hope that people could change if they truly wanted to. A few months later, the atmosphere at Hamilton Grocers had transformed. What was once a place of tension and division had become a hub of inclusivity and community. The changes implemented by David, Maya, and the corporate office had taken root, and the store felt different, lighter, more welcoming. Tom's leadership style had evolved as well. He no longer barked orders at his employees or dismissed customers with a wave of his hand. Instead, he led with empathy, listening to his staff and engaging with customers in a way that made them feel valued. It was clear to everyone that Tom had changed, and while some customers were slow to warm up to him, others appreciated his efforts. Maya continued to visit the store regularly, each time feeling more comfortable and confident. She had gone from being a target of Tom's discrimination to becoming a symbol of the store's transformation. Employees and customers alike treated her with respect, not because they feared retribution, but because they had learned to see her as she truly was, an intelligent, capable young woman who deserved the same dignity as anyone else. One afternoon, Maya wheeled into the store to pick up a few items for dinner. As she moved through the aisles, she noticed something: news mall signs posted at the ends of each aisle, reminding customers and staff to be kind, be inclusive. It was a simple message, but it represented everything Maya had fought for. As she reached the produce section, she spotted Lisa, who had become a close friend during the whole ordeal. Lisa waved, her smile bright. "Hey, Maya, need help with anything today?" Maya smiled back. "Just picking up some tomatoes for my lasagna. You know me." Lisa laughed. "Ah, the famous lasagna, Derek. The top shelves are always tricky." Maya nodded, grateful for Lisa's continued support. "Thanks, but I think I've got it." As she wheeled away, Maya noticed Tom talking to a group of employees near the registers. He caught her eye and gave her a small nod, a gesture of mutual respect. Maya nodded back, feeling a sense of closure she hadn't expected. Tom had a long road ahead of him, but she was willing to give him the benefit of the doubt. People could change, after all. She had seen it with her own eyes. Later that day, as Maya headed to the checkout, she noticed a new display near the entrance, a small kiosk with brochures about disability rights, diversity, and inclusion. It was another sign of the store's ongoing commitment to change, and it filled Maya with a sense of pride. She had helped make this happen. As she rolled up to the register, the cashier greeted her warmly. "Hi, Maya. How's your day going?" "Good, thanks," Maya replied, her smile genuine. "And yours?" "Great, we've been busy, but it's been a good kind of busy," the cashier said as she scanned Maya's items. "You know, things have really changed around here since all of this started. It feels like a better place to work now." Maya smiled, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. "I'm glad to hear that." As she paid for her groceries and wheeled out of the store, Maya couldn't help but feel a sense of accomplishment. She had taken a stand, faced adversity, and come out stronger on the other side. And in doing so, she had helped create a space where people felt safe, respected, and valued. It wasn't just about her anymore, it was about the community, about making sure that no one else had to go through what she had. Hamilton Grocers had become a symbol of what was possible when people stood up for what was right, and Maya was proud to have been a part of that change. A year had passed since Maya's confrontation with Tom, and Hamilton Grocers had continued to thrive. The store had become a beacon of inclusivity in the town, known not just for its groceries, but for the welcoming environment it offered to all who entered. It had partnered with local organizations to host events promoting diversity, inclusion, and accessibility. and the community had embraced these changes wholeheartedly. Maya had graduated high school and was preparing to head off to college, where she planned to study social justice and advocacy. Her experiences at Hamilton Grocers had inspired her to pursue a career where she could continue to fight for the rights of marginalized communities. She knew that her story was just one of many, and she wanted to use her voice to make a difference on a larger scale. Before leaving for college, Maya decided to visit the store one last time. As she wheeled through the familiar aisles, she was struck by how far things had come. The signs promoting kindness and inclusion, the accessible layout, the friendly staff, it all felt like a testament to the power of change. When she reached the checkout, Tom was standing nearby, overseeing the staff with a calm, collected demeanor. He spotted her and made his way over, a small smile on his face. "Maya," Tom said, his tone respectful. "I heard you're heading off to college soon. Congratulations." Maya smiled, nodding. "Thanks, Tom. You'll miss this place." Tom chuckled softly. "Well, you've left quite the mark. Things wouldn't be the same around here without you." Maya looked at him, the man who had once made her feel small, now standing before her as someone who had learned, grown, and changed. "You've changed too," she said, her voice warm but firm. "And that matters." Tom nodded, a hint of emotion in his eyes. "I'm trying, Maya, and I'll keep trying." As Maya left the store, she felt a sense of peace. She had fought for something bigger than herself, and she had won. But more importantly, she had shown that change was possible one person, one store, one community at a time. The future was wide open, and Maya was ready to take on whatever challenges came her way. She knew there would be more battles to fight, more people to stand up for, but she was ready. After all, she had already proven that even the smallest actions could lead to the biggest changes. And that was only the beginning. If Maya's story has inspired you and you believe in the power of change, don't forget to hit that subscribe button to stay connected for more empowering stories like this one. Together, we can keep sharing voices that matter and continue pushing for a world where everyone is treated with dignity and respect. Turn on notifications so you don't miss the next chapter in this journey. After the emotionally charged events of the past weeks, it felt like the right time to step back and enjoy some quality time together. Mia and Marcus were thrilled when Derek suggested they visit the local park, which had a large playground, bike trails, and wide open spaces for them to run around. It was the perfect place to let the kids blow off steam and for Derek and Jessica to unwind. As they arrived at the park, the kids immediately darted toward the playground, their laughter echoing through the air. Derek watched them with a soft smile, appreciating the simplicity of the moment. He and Jessica found a shaded bench near the play area, where they could keep an eye on the kids while they relaxed. It was long before other families joined the playground area, and soon the park was alive with the sounds of children playing and parents chatting. As Derek leaned back on the bench, enjoying the breeze, a familiar voice called out his name. "Derek, hey." He looked up and saw Lisa Turner, the woman who had stood up for him during the incident at the electronics store, walking toward him with a big smile. She was holding the hand of a young boy who looked about the same age as Mia. Derek stood up to greet her, smiling warmly. "Lisa," he said, shaking her hand. "Good to see you." "Good to see you too," Lisa replied. She gestured toward the boy at her side. "This is my son, Jaden." Jaden waved shyly, and Derek smiled down at him. "Nice to meet you, Jaden." Lisa and Derek chatted for a few minutes, catching up on life and how things had been since the store incident. She mentioned how proud she was of the way things had unfolded after that day, especially with Tom taking initiative and the staff discussing unconscious bias. "I didn't expect the store to respond the way they did," Lisa admitted, "but I'm glad they did. You handled it so well, Derek. It inspired me to speak up more when I see something wrong." Derek smiled, feeling a sense of camaraderie with Lisa. "We all have a role to play," he said, "and am grateful you played yours." As they continued talking, the kids started running around the playground, Mia and Marcus quickly making new friends, including Jaden. The sight of them playing together, free of worry, brought a smile to Derek's face. In moments like these, the world seemed simpler, purer. Lisa noticed the way Derek was watching the kids and smiled knowingly. They don't see the world the way adults do, huh? No prejudice, no assumptions. Just kids being kids. Derek nodded. Yeah, it's a shame that innocence gets lost as we grow older. But it doesn't have to, Lisa added. Not if we teach them better. And I think we're doing that. Derek looked over at her, appreciating her optimism. He had been focused so much on the challenges, the uphill battles, that he hadn't paused to recognize the small victories. But she was right. By raising their children with empathy, kindness, and a sense of justice, they were planting seeds for a better future. They talked a bit more before Lisa and Jaden headed off to meet some friends, leaving Derek to sit back down beside Jessica, who had been quietly observing the exchange. You know, Jessica said softly, I think you're doing better than you realize. Derek glanced at her, feeling the truth of her words. Maybe he was. Maybe, little by little, he was helping to create the change he wanted to see in the world. As the day at the park came to an end, Derek, Jessica, Mia, and Marcus piled back into the car, the kids happily chattering about their adventures on the playground. Derek smiled as he listened to them, feeling a sense of peace settle over him. The past few weeks had been full of challenges, but they had also been full of growth both for Derek personally and for those around him. He had faced prejudice, yes, but he had also witnessed the strength of community, the power of people standing up for what was right. As he drove home, Derek's thoughts drifted back to the conversation he had had with Jessica about writing more. Maybe there was something to it. Maybe sharing his stories, his experiences, could help others see the world differently, could open their eyes to the quiet struggles that so many people faced every day. He didn't have all the answers, and he knew there was still so much work to be done. But for the first time in a long time, Derek felt hopeful. He had his family, his community, and the strength of knowing that even in small ways, he was making a difference. And sometimes, that was all it took to create a brighter future. As they pulled into their driveway, Derek glanced at Jessica, who smiled back at him with the same warmth and encouragement she had always given. Together, they were raising a family rooted in love and resilience, a family that would, he hoped, grow up to make the world a little bit better. Derek took a deep breath, feeling the cool evening air as they stepped out of the car. The future stretched out before him, full of possibility. The following week, life had returned to a comforting rhythm for Derek and his family. Work remained steady, and the usual family routines kept him grounded. However, there was still a quiet hum of change in the background conversations that had begun after the incident at the electronics store were still unfolding in unexpected ways. One afternoon, as Derek sat at his desk catching up on paperwork, his phone buzzed. It was an email notification, something he hadn't been expecting. Opening it, he was surprised to see that it wasn't work-related at all. The subject line read, "A message from Sarah Haynes." For a long moment, Derek just stared at the screen. Sarah Haynes, the woman who had triggered the confrontation at the store, had somehow found his contact information. His initial instinct was to ignore the message, to leave it unread. After all, what could she possibly have to say? But curiosity, and perhaps a sense of unfinished business, led him to click it open. The email was short, but it caught Derek off guard. Subject: A message from Sarah Haynes. Dear Derek, I've thought a lot about what happened at the store that day, and I realize I was wrong. I judged you unfairly and acted out of anger and fear, and for that, I'm sorry. I know an apology doesn't undo the harm I caused, but I want you to know that I've been trying to understand why I acted the way I did. I've been reading about unconscious bias and learning about how my own prejudices have shaped my worldview. I know you have no reason to forgive me, but I wanted to apologize and let you know that I'm trying to be better. Sarah Haynes. Derek sat back in his chair, his mind reeling from the unexpected apology. It wasn't what he'd anticipated. In fact, he hadn't anticipated anything from Sarah at all. He had written her off as another person who would remain stuck in their ways, unwilling to reflect or change. But here it was, an acknowledgement of her wrongs, and perhaps more importantly, a willingness to learn. He exhaled deeply, staring at the words on the screen. Forgiveness wasn't something that came easily, especially when you'd been wronged as deeply as he had. Yet, Derek knew that forgiveness wasn't about the other person. It was about letting go of the weight they'd placed on you. After a long moment of consideration, he typed a brief response. Subject: a message from Sarah Haynes. Dear Sarah, thank you for your message. It's not easy to reflect on ourselves, especially when it comes to our biases. I appreciate your apology and the steps you're taking to understand your actions. It's a process for all of us. Best, Derek Carter. After sending the message, Derek felt a sense of relief. He didn't expect a long, ongoing correspondence with Sarah, nor did he need one. What mattered was that she had reached a place of self-awareness, and maybe, just maybe, that awareness would extend beyond her interactions with him. Derek leaned back, his fingers interlaced behind his head, as he reflected on how the entire situation had evolved. From the heated confrontation in the store to this apology, a moment of understanding was more than he had expected, and it gave him hope that even the people who seemed the most unlikely to change could learn, could grow, given the right circumstances. He turned off his phone and smiled faintly, feeling that this chapter of his life had finally reached its resolution. A few weeks later, Derek found himself speaking to a group of students at a local community center. Tom Jenkins, ever the proactive store manager, had reached out to Derek again, this time with an offer to collaborate on a broader conversation about prejudice and empathy within the community. Tom had been organizing an outreach program for young people, focusing on building bridges between different communities and fostering understanding. The idea had resonated with Derek. He had always believed that real change started with the younger generation, and this was an opportunity to make that change happen at a grassroots level. Standing at the front of the room, Derek surveyed the group of students. They were a diverse mix, some barely teenagers, others in their early 20s, but all of them looked eager to hear what he had to say. Jessica had come with him for support, sitting toward the back of the room, her presence a comforting anchor as always. Derek cleared his throat and began. We all come from different backgrounds, different experiences, and sometimes those differences can make us feel like we don't understand each other. But the truth is, understanding starts with listening and being open to seeing the world from someone else's point of view. The students listened attentively as Derek recounted his story, not just the incident at the store, but his broader experience of living in a world where he was often judged before he was known. He didn't sugarcoat the challenges, but he also focused on the positive moments, the people who had stood up for him, the small victories that had led to real change. The thing about bias, Derek continued, is that sometimes we don't even realize we have it. It's like a lens that colors how we see the world, and it takes real effort to recognize that lens and adjust it. One student, a young woman with curly hair and a thoughtful expression, raised her hand. How do we do that? How do we start recognizing our own biases? Derek smiled, grateful for the question. It starts with being honest with yourself. Acknowledge that no one is perfect, that we all have blind spots. Then, be open to learning. Talk to people who come from different backgrounds. Listen to their experiences. And when you see something that's wrong, stand up, speak out. You don't have to be loud or aggressive, but just letting someone know they're not alone makes a world of difference. The conversation continued for over an hour, with students asking thoughtful questions about how to navigate a world filled with differences. By the time it was over, Derek felt a renewed sense of purpose. These young people weren't just listening, they were thinking, reflecting, and eager to make the world a better place. As the students filtered out of the room, Jessica approached him, her smile wide with pride. "You were amazing," she said, slipping her hand into his. Derek chuckled softly. "I just hope they took something away from it." "They did," Jessica said confidently. "You're planting seeds, Derek. These kids are going to take what they learned today and carry it with them. That's how change happens." Derek nodded, squeezing her hand. He knew she was right. Every conversation, every connection was a step toward a brighter future. And while he didn't expect the world to change overnight, he could feel the momentum shifting, one conversation at a time. As the seasons began to change, Derek found himself reflecting more on the idea of growth, both personal and societal. He had spent the past few months sharing his experiences, writing about his journey, and speaking to groups about prejudice and empathy. He had started writing more frequently, his blog gaining a small but loyal following. People from all walks of life had reached out, sharing their own stories of bias and discrimination, or simply thanking him for his insight. One afternoon, as Derek sat at his desk, his phone buzzed with a notification. It was another email, but this time from a high school in a neighboring town. They had read one of his blog posts about standing up to prejudice and wanted to invite him to speak to their students. Derek smiled as he read the invitation. What had started as a personal story had become something much larger, a ripple effect, reaching people he had never met, in places he had never been. It was proof that when people shared their stories, when they opened up about the things that mattered, they could make a real impact. He stood up and walked over to the window, looking out at the world beyond. The sunlight filtered through the trees, casting long shadows across the yard. It was a beautiful day, full of possibility. And as Derek looked out, he felt a deep sense of hope for the future, not just for himself and his family, but for the world they were all helping to shape. Mia and Marcus ran into the room, their laughter filling the air as they played a game of tag around the furniture. Jessica followed close behind, her smile bright and warm. Derek turned away from the window and watched his family, feeling a deep sense of contentment. They were his reason for everything, for standing tall in the face of adversity, for sharing his story, for doing his part to make the world a better place. And as he looked at their faces, full of love and laughter, Derek knew that the future was bright. It wouldn't always be easy, but it was full of potential, full of opportunities to learn, to grow, and to create a world where empathy and understanding prevailed. In the end, that was all he could ask for. As the day wound down, Derek sat back at his desk, reflecting on everything that had transpired over the last few months. From the confrontation at the electronics store to the inspiring conversations with young people, he had witnessed firsthand how one small action could create lasting change. Every step forward mattered. He logged into his blog and drafted another post, this time focusing on the idea of speaking out, of standing up for what's right. He knew there was more work to do, always more people to reach, more stories to tell. But he felt confident that he was on the right path. As Derek prepared to hit publish, he paused, thinking of everyone who had been following his journey. If you've been inspired by this story and want to be part of a community that stands up for empathy, justice, and change, don't forget to subscribe to the blog. Join the conversation, share your thoughts, and stay tuned for more stories about making a difference one step at a time. Together we can build a future that's brighter for everyone. Satisfied, Derek hit the publish button and leaned back in his chair. The work wasn't done, but with every new subscriber, every person who read and connected with his message, he knew they were getting closer to the world they all deserved. And that was worth everything.